History calls him a monster, a man who murdered his own kin and laughed, while an empire burned. But every monster has a beginning. Before he was the Chaos Prime Minister, Cao Cao was a hitman. He walked into the lion's den with a legendary dagger to kill a tyrant. He failed. He fled. And in that moment of failure, the noble hero died. On the run, fueled by pure paranoia, he slaughtered an entire innocent family, his father's best friends, because he thought they were sharpening knives for him. They were just cooking him dinner. Standing over the bodies, he said the words that would haunt his legacy. "I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me." It wasn't just a quote. It was a survival manual for the most brutal era in human history. Today, we aren't just looking at the battles. We're looking at the mind hacks, the fake dreams, and the psychological warfare of the man who won the game but lost the narrative. This is Cao Cao. By the year 1906, the Han Dynasty wasn't an empire anymore. It was a corpse being fought over by scavengers. Most warlords viewed the teenage emperor as a burden, an expensive mouth to feed, with no army to back him up. But Cao Cao understood a secret that the others missed. Power isn't just about swords, it's about the narrative. He didn't just offer the emperor a house, he offered him a cage made of gold. By bringing the imperial court to his own base, Cao Cao became the voice of the state. Suddenly, every rival he executed wasn't just a competitor, they were a traitor to the throne. He had turned the will of heaven into his own personal legal department. But his psychological dominance worked on the battlefield too. Imagine his army during a brutal summer campaign. They are parched, dying of thirst. Their bodies are physically shutting down. Cao Cao doesn't look for a map. He looks for a story. He shouts, "There is a massive forest of lush, sour plums just over that hill." The soldiers' brains did something incredible. The vivid thought of the sour fruit triggered a biological reflex. Their mouths began to salivate. That tiny bit of moisture was enough to keep them moving for another 10 miles. He didn't find a well. He found a biological hack. He wasn't just winning battles, he was rewiring reality itself. Cao Cao once said that the law applies to everyone, even the man who writes it. During a march, he forbid his cavalry from trampling the farmer's wheat. Then, his own horse got spooked and bolted into the field. The penalty for trampling wheat was death. The army stopped. Everyone held their breath. Would the prime minister execute himself? He raised his sword and cut off his own hair. In ancient China, cutting your hair was a massive social disgrace. It was like a symbolic suicide. He proved that even his own head wasn't above the law. That's how you get 40,000 men to follow you into hell. You show them you bleed the same as they do. But discipline wasn't enough. He needed fear. He started a rumor that he had a protective spirit that killed anyone who approached him while he slept. One night, a servant tried to tuck him in. Cao Cao jumped up, killed the man in his sleep, and went back to bed. The next morning, he acted horrified. He cried for the servant. But from that day on, no one ever dared to come near him while his eyes were closed. Was it a dream, or was it the ultimate security system? This was his selection by merit. He didn't want virtuous men who followed old traditions. He wanted killers, thieves, and geniuses who were loyal only to him. He was building a new world order, and his rivals were terrified. But his greatest test was coming. One man stood in the way of everything, his former best friend, Yuan Shao. It was time for the Battle of the Giants. Before the armies met, there was a quiet dinner that changed history. Cao Cao sat across from his rival, Liu Bei. On the surface, it was just two friends drinking boiled wine in the rain. But it was actually a deadly interrogation. Cao Cao looked him in the eye and said, "The only true heroes in this world are you and me." He was testing him. If Liu Bei acted like a hero, Cao Cao would kill him right there. Liu Bei was so terrified, he dropped his spoon, using a clap of thunder as an excuse for his trembling hands. Liu Bei escaped, but the real threat was in the north, Yuan Shao. He had 110,000 men and enough supplies to last years. Cao Cao had 20,000 men, and they were starving. By all accounts, the hero was about to be erased from history. Then came Guandu. Cao Cao didn't fight the army, he fought their stomachs. In a daring midnight raid, he bypassed the front line and burned Yuan Shao's entire food supply at Wuchao. 110,000 soldiers woke up to find their breakfast turned to ash. When he won, he found letters from his own officers who tried to betray him. He burned them all without reading them. He said, "When I was losing, even I didn't know if I'd survive. Why should I blame them?" He was now the undisputed king of the North. Only one thing stood between him and a unified China: the Great River. 208 AD. Cao Cao was one river crossing away from winning the game. He had 800,000 men. His enemies? Barely 50,000. On paper, this wasn't a war. It was an execution. But the north was a land of horses, and the south was a land of ships. His elite cavalry was useless on the water. They were seasick, exhausted, and dying of tropical fever. To solve it, Cao Cao did something brilliant. He chained his ships together with iron rings to create a stable, floating platform. It worked. His soldiers could finally stand. But he had forgotten the lesson of the plum forest. Never let your solution become your cage. By chaining his ships, he turned his navy into a single, immovable target. He was betting everything on the wind blowing away from him. It was a 99% safe bet. Then, the 1% happened. The wind shifted. The southeastern gale began to roar. The defector boats from the south weren't coming to surrender. They were suicide fire ships. Because of the chains, Cao Cao couldn't move. He could only watch. The river turned into a liquid furnace. Thousands of men were burned alive or drowned in their heavy armor. In one single night, the dream of a unified China was incinerated. The invincible general was now a man running for his life through the mud. He survived the retreat, laughing like a madman to hide the pain. But the world had changed. The empire was broken. The era of the three kingdoms had officially begun. Even in his final years, Cao Cao was playing games. When an envoy from the Xiongnu tribes came to visit, Cao Cao had a handsome subordinate sit on the throne while he stood by as a guard. He wanted to see if the envoy could spot the real power. The envoy later said, "The king is impressive, but the guard standing next to him, he is the true hero." But then there's the Cao Cao that history tries to hide. He spent a fortune to ransom the poetess Cai Wenji from the northern tribes, simply because he valued her father's legacy and her talent. He wasn't just a destroyer of empires, he was a protector of culture. He was a poet who wrote, "Short is life, like the morning dew." He knew he would be remembered as a villain. He didn't care. He did the evil things necessary to end a 400-year civil war that others were too noble to finish. So, was he a monster or a visionary? A traitor or a savior? Maybe he was just a man who saw the world for what it truly was and decided to lead it anyway. Tell me your side in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks.